Story number 1. I am a detective and have worked in law enforcement for years. I've seen some terrible things that stick with you, no matter how much time passes. I'm not the type to believe in the supernatural, but there's one call from early in my career that still rattles me. It started as just another welfare check, but I swear something about it followed me home. Even today, I can't decide if it was my mind playing tricks on me or if something else really happened. The report was straightforward. An older man living alone in a rural area hadn't been seen in months. His neighbor finally got concerned enough to call it in. I remember glancing through the file and thinking it was probably just another unattended death. I'd done a few of those before, always depressing, sometimes nasty, but not unusual. When I pulled up to the property, something felt wrong. The house itself was small and ordinary, but the windows were blackened with thick mold, so much so that no light could get in. The glass swarmed with flies, their little bodies buzzing and twitching against the panes. The man's car was still parked in the garage, covered in dust but untouched, like it had been sitting there for months. No signs of forced entry. The front door was locked, but the knob gave when I pushed harder, and it creaked open. The second I stepped inside, the air hit me, damp, sour, heavy enough to choke on. There was a stillness in there that didn't feel right, like I was intruding on something that didn't want to be disturbed. The living room is where I found him. The sight of it still makes my stomach turn. The man was wrapped in sheets of bubble wrap from head to toe, like someone had tried to preserve him. He was in a chair that had toppled over halfway, so his torso was slumped on the ground, but his legs were still bent, like he was sitting upright. His outline was still vaguely human, his clothes intact, but his flesh had fused into the carpet, sunken and mummified into the fibers, as if the house had started absorbing him. The smell was unbearable. It wasn't just rot, it was thick, sickly sweet decay mixed with stagnant water. My eyes watered, and I nearly gagged into my sleeve. Flies swarmed the air, their wings sticking to my skin when they brushed past. The strangest part? The rest of the house was spotless. When I checked the kitchen, I found 2 neat grocery bags, full and untouched, sitting on the floor. No spoiled milk leaking from cartons, no mold on the bread. Perfectly fine. The counters were wiped down, and the floor had a sheen, like someone had just cleaned it. That didn't make sense. No one had been inside in months. At least no one was supposed to have been. Down in the basement, inches of foul water covered the floor. Dead flies floated in clusters on the surface. The walls down there were slick with black mold, reaching up like claws. I felt my boots sink with every step, and the smell intensified until I thought I'd pass out. No sign of a cat, though there was a litter box upstairs. No family around, no witnesses. Just this strange, grotesque tableau in an otherwise well-kept home. I made my report as best I could, but there was one thing I didn't put in writing. As I was leaving, I looked back at the body one last time. Through the layers of bubble wrap, where his eyes should have been, I swear I saw 2 dark pools of blood. They were fresh, bright, and wet. I blinked and they were gone. Just empty, cloudy plastic again. That was supposed to be the end of it. But after that night, things changed for me. It started small. Some evenings I'd walk into my apartment and smell that same pungent rot in the air. It would hit me like a wall, even though I lived in a clean, dry place with no leaks. The odor would vanish as suddenly as it came. Other times I'd see streaks of blood splattered across my floor, smeared like someone had dragged their face across it. I'd flip on the lights and it would be gone. Nothing there. Just clean wood, no stains. I brushed it off at first, stress maybe, or my mind replaying the scene in different ways. But then the night started. The first time I was drifting off to sleep when I felt hot breath on the back of my neck, like someone leaning close enough to whisper. I jolted awake, but there was nothing there. My apartment was silent, and I lived alone. After that, the breathing became whispers, low, garbled sounds right at the edge of my hearing, too soft to make out words, but close enough to feel. I'd wake in a cold sweat, certain someone had been right beside my bed, and then came the worst night. I'll never forget it. I woke up suddenly, frozen in place. My entire body was numb, like sleep paralysis, but I was fully awake. At the foot of my bed stood the man, or at least what was left of him. He was wrapped in the same bubble wrap, his body stiff, his form warped. Flies clung to him, stuck to the plastic, their wings buzzing weakly as if glued in place. His head tilted unnaturally, and though his face was obscured, I could feel him staring at me. Slowly, his arm started to stretch forward. The plastic crinkled as it moved, his hand reaching out toward me, fingers rigid and unnatural. My chest tightened so badly I thought my heart would stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't move. And then, nothing. He was gone. The room was empty. I was alone again. I don't know how long I lay there, shaking and drenched in sweat. By the time I managed to sit up, my legs were weak and my sheets were damp with cold. I never saw him that clearly again, but the presence never left. For months afterward, I kept smelling that rot. The whispers came and went. Sometimes when I walked past a mirror, I swore I saw a figure standing behind me, head tilted, plastic crinkling faintly. I still don't know what to make of it. Maybe it was trauma, my brain replaying things I wasn't equipped to process. Maybe it was just exhaustion, hallucinations from stress. I tell myself that's all it was. But even now, years later, there are nights when I wake up to the faint sound of bubble wrap crackling in the dark. And every time I wonder if he's finally finished reaching for me. Story number 2. I used to think working in internal affairs in a prison would harden me to just about anything. I'd seen guards smuggle in contraband, inmates vanish into thin air during shifts, even cases where staff went missing after hours and were later found sleeping in their cars. Unable to explain why they left. But the one that stuck with me, the one I still can't explain, was something we called the matches case. It started with fires. They were scattered, random, and always during rainstorms. Abandoned houses on the edge of town, a collapsed wharf no one had touched in years, even an old cemetery shed that hadn't been unlocked in decades. Each time, by the time we got there, the fires were already smoldering out, like they'd been fed by something unnatural. No fuel, no accelerant, nothing we could track. Just the faint smell of sulfur clinging to the air and one unused match lying neatly on the threshold. Never burned, never wet. Just sitting there like someone had placed it down carefully. I wasn't supposed to take it personally, but by the 4th fire, I started feeling like it was aimed at me. The cemetery case in particular bothered me, so I drove out there on my own one night. It was raining steady, the kind that soaks your clothes through in seconds. The place was empty, the gravestones leaning at odd angles like broken teeth. I parked just outside the gates, engine humming low, windshield wipers struggling against the downpour. For nearly an hour, nothing. Just rain and the kind of silence that feels thicker than it should. Then around 2 in the morning, my headlights flickered out. Dead. The dashboard lights went with them. The engine cut off too, like the whole car had just decided to give up. In the dark, with the rain pattering against the roof, I caught a flicker of orange in the corner of my eye. A flame, small, no bigger than a match head, hovering knee-high, weaving between the gravestones. At first, I thought maybe it was a trick of my eyes, but it moved with intention, not random. I stepped out, rain immediately soaking through my jacket. The air was sharp and metallic, that same smell from the fire scenes. Burnt matches, sulfur, faint and acrid. My radio crackled with static, useless. The flame seemed to keep its distance, never closer, never farther, just guiding me deeper between the stones. I pushed on, boots squelching in the mud. My breath clouded in the air, though the rain should have kept everything warm. The flame winked out suddenly and I stood alone between the graves, surrounded by nothing but the hiss of rain. That's when I heard footsteps. Behind me, slow and deliberate. I spun, flashlight cutting through sheets of water, and froze. There was a man, or what looked like one. His skin was blackened and cracked like burnt wood, limbs stiff but moving. His face, I don't even know how to describe it, a mess of charred flesh, hollow sockets, yet somehow still human. He lifted his hand. Between his blackened fingers was a single match. He struck it against his palm, and the head flared up instantly, burning bright even against the downpour. The smell hit me full force, rotten sulfur and scorched hair. Before I could move, he pressed it to his chest. His body caught like it had been soaked in fuel, flames racing up over him, though the rain should have killed it instantly. The fire hissed and roared, yet he made no sound. I ran. Mud splashed, gravestones blurred past me, the weight of the rain pressing me down. At the gates, I dared a glance back. Nothing was there. No burning man, no flames, just darkness. Except, lying on a mossy headstone not 5 feet from me, was a single unused match. Dry, perfect, like it had been waiting. I picked it up without thinking, and the air around me went hot in a rush, like opening an oven door. Then it was gone, back to cold rain. I dropped the match and got in my dead car. Strangely, when I turned the key, the engine roared to life as if nothing had happened. After that night, the fire stopped. No more calls, no more matches left at scenes. I should have felt relief, but it only made me more uneasy, like I'd witnessed the conclusion to something I was never supposed to see. A week later, we got a report about a man admitted to the hospital with burns. Severe, but not fatal. The file was vague, said he'd been found alone in an alley, incoherent, smelling of sulfur. I drove over, more curiosity than duty. He was unconscious when I saw him, wrapped in bandages, skin mottled with red burns. The smell clung to him, faint but undeniable. On the tray next to his bed sat a matchbox, plain cardboard, damp around the edges, like it had been out in the rain. I stepped into the hall to call the nurse. Took maybe a minute, tops. When we came back in, the matchbox was gone. The nurse swore she hadn't touched it. Security checked the footage, but the angle didn't cover the bed. No one had gone in or out. It just wasn't there anymore. I told myself it was stress, coincidence, my mind connecting dots that didn't exist. Matches are common. Fires happen. People do strange things during storms. But the smell, that sulfur sting, still comes back at the oddest times. Once, walking past the prison boiler room. Another driving past that same cemetery at night. Always faint, always gone in seconds, but enough to make my stomach tighten. The official report closed with no suspect, no motive, nothing but speculation. My copy was thin, most of the pages redacted or missing. When I asked around, most people brushed it off like an old rumor, something not worth digging into. But I can't forget the way the match felt in my hand that night, the sudden wave of heat in the middle of a downpour. I can't forget the burning man's hollow sockets fixed on me, like he knew me. And sometimes when the rain comes heavy, I catch myself checking the threshold of my door, looking for something small, ordinary, and horribly out of place. A single unused match. Story number 3. 4 years ago, when I was 30, I got assigned to a missing persons case that has eaten at my mind ever since. I've handled a lot of cases, some with violent outcomes, some with happy reunions. But this one, it stuck, like a splinter under the skin that never comes out. The missing kid was named Ben, 17 years old. He was supposed to be heading to a friend's house on a Friday night. He never made it. Both Ben and his car vanished. No leads, no witnesses, just nothing. Cases like that tend to fade into the pile, but something about this one never sat right. Fast forward to just a few weeks ago. A source tipped us off about the city pond. It sits right in the center of town, an old man-made pond with cracked concrete edges and dark water that never seems to clear. We sent divers in expecting nothing, but they actually found a car. Ben's car. At first I thought maybe this was finally closure, but when forensics pulled it apart, it didn't add up. The inside of the car was bone dry. No trace of algae, no rust, nothing you'd expect from a car that's supposedly been underwater for 4 years. Even weirder, there were no signs that anyone had ever driven it. The seat was in the factory position, pedals untouched, odometer matching the last official record from the DMV. It was as if the car had been sitting in a showroom, not at the bottom of a pond. And yet there was clear traffic camera footage of Ben driving that exact car on the night he vanished. I've seen the clip 100 times. His face blurry but undeniable, his hands on the wheel, the headlights cutting through the dark. Then nothing. The car never showed up again until it appeared in that pond. That's when I decided to dig deeper. Most of the nights I was working on the case, I was alone in the office. I'd pore over the files, printouts of the footage, witness statements that led nowhere. It was one of those nights when I heard it, the sound of water. At first it was faint, like someone sloshing around in soaked shoes. It grew louder until it was unmistakable, splashing right in the hallway outside my office. I got up, annoyed, thinking maybe the janitor had spilled a mop bucket. But when I opened the door, there was just water. A thin sheet of it across the floor, spreading out like something had just dragged itself dripping through. The thing is, there are no water pipes in that part of the building, no vents, nothing that could have caused it. I remember laughing at myself like an idiot, trying to shake off the tension. But then I walked into the pantry and out of nowhere, my chest seized. My lungs felt like they were being crushed, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pull in air. My throat burned with that specific panic you get when you've inhaled water. For a few seconds, I swear I was drowning, pulled downward into something that wasn't even there. The next thing I knew, I wasn't in the office anymore. I woke up lying on cold ground, my whole body soaked, the taste of pond water in my mouth. When I looked up, I realized I was right next to the city pond. I had no memory of how I got there. My car was still parked at the office. My phone was sitting on my desk, but I had somehow ended up miles away, drenched like I just climbed out of the water. I kept it to myself. Who would believe me? But it didn't stop. Since that night, I keep finding patches of water in places they shouldn't be. At first it was in the office, a chair left wet, papers with damp edges curling up like they'd been exposed to humidity. Then it started happening at home. I'd wake up and there'd be a footprint on the wooden floor beside my bed, clear and wet, as if someone had been standing there watching me. Once I was brushing my teeth when the bathroom mirror fogged over, though the water wasn't even hot. A streak formed in the condensation, like a finger had dragged through it. I don't know why, but I swear it looked like the outline of a car, boxy and crude, like something a kid might draw. Another time I came home late and found the carpet soaked in the living room. The windows were locked, the ceiling showed no leak, and yet the water smelled faintly of algae. That smell, that thick pond rot smell, has stuck to my nostrils ever since. Sometimes when I sit in silence, I hear it again. Not just splashing, but the sound of a car engine turning over, struggling against water. A dull thud, like a hand hitting glass from underwater. And once, I swore I heard breathing right behind me. Wet, rattling, as though someone's lungs were filled with fluid. I've tried to reason with myself. Maybe I've been sleepwalking. Maybe stress is making me hallucinate. Maybe the pond smell comes from mold I can't find. A skeptic could easily say I'm mixing exhaustion with obsession, that my brain is inventing things to fill in the gaps of the case. But the patches of water keep showing up. Last week I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of dripping. I followed it to the kitchen. The floor was slick, water pooling beneath the fridge. I crouched down, ready to pull it away from the wall, but then I noticed the droplets weren't coming from inside the fridge or from any pipe. They were falling straight down from midair, collecting into a puddle that stretched toward me. When I looked up, I swore for half a second I saw a face in the ceiling, blurred, pale, hair floating upward as though submerged, and then it was gone. I haven't told anyone this in detail. People know me as a rational guy, level-headed, not prone to ghost stories, but I don't have a rational answer for why I keep waking up at the edge of that pond. 3 times now, I've opened my eyes there without memory of leaving the house. Each time I've been drenched, shivering, the water around me rippling though there's no wind. We never found Ben, not a trace of him, but lately I've started to wonder if maybe he never left that car at all. If maybe he's still in the water, stuck somewhere between being found and being forgotten. And for some reason, he's decided to pull me into it. The strangest part is, I'm starting to expect it. Every time I see those wet patches in my hallway or feel the sudden chill of damp air in my bedroom, I know it's only a matter of time before I end up at that pond again. And the last time I was there, I noticed something new. This time, it wasn't just the car at the bottom. For a split second, I could swear I saw 2 sets of headlights glowing faintly under the surface. Story number 4. I've worked as a social worker for years, and I've seen my fair share of troubling cases. But there was one family that stayed with me, one I can't explain no matter how many times I turn it over in my head. It started with the Gellers. They had twin daughters, Amy and Allison, bright, happy girls, the kind you see in those staged family portraits at malls. Nothing about them or the family seemed unusual at first. Then Amy began to disappear. It wasn't like she ran away or stormed out after an argument. She would simply vanish. The first time, her mother thought Amy had fallen asleep in the closet while playing hide and seek. They searched the whole house, the yard, even called neighbors. Hours later, she appeared back in her room, sitting on the bed, brushing her doll's hair. She had no idea she'd been gone. At first, everyone tried to explain it away. Kids wander, kids hide. But it kept happening, hours at a time, gone. Always reappearing in her room, always with no memory. The part that shook me came from the mother's description of seeing both girls at once. She'd walk past the living room and see Allison watching cartoons. Moments later, she'd go upstairs to check on Amy, only to find both Amy and Allison curled up in Amy's bed. Two warm bodies breathing in rhythm, sound asleep. She'd rush back downstairs, but the living room would be empty. When I asked about these doubles, the parents grew nervous. They said it was exhaustion, stress, too little sleep. But the incidents piled up. One time, Amy woke up holding a filthy, corroded coin. Another morning, she had a strip of cloth, stiff and grimy like it had been buried. The worst was the doll, porcelain with cracks webbing across the face, one glass eye missing. It looked decades old. No one in the family had seen it before. They kept it in a box in the garage until one day it was just gone. I tried to approach the case logically. Sleepwalking, dissociation, a neurological disorder. But none of the medical or psychological evaluations showed anything unusual. During one of my visits, I noticed a framed family photograph on the mantle. The four of them smiling stiffly, standard pose shot. Except in that moment, I saw 5 people. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stood between the twins. She was blurred at the edges, her face soft like an overexposed film, but she was smiling right at the camera. When I blinked and looked again, the photo was normal, just 4 Gellers. I tried not to mention it. Writing it down later, I told myself it was a trick of the light. I'd been overthinking, staring too long. Still, I wanted more answers, so I asked the family if I could set up a baby monitor in the twins' room. They agreed reluctantly. That night, scrolling through static-filled audio, I heard faint singing. 2 voices, lilting, weaving together in a tune I couldn't place. The voices didn't belong to children. They had an old quality, like something from a warped record. When I rushed upstairs, both girls were in bed, dead asleep, their mouths slack, chests rising and falling. The parents wanted to move after that. They said the atmosphere in the house was unbearable. The mother swore she felt someone sitting on her bed at night, pressing the mattress down. The father admitted he heard running footsteps in the hall when both girls were accounted for. Before they left, I went back one last time. The air in the house felt wrong, heavy, as if each room held its breath. I remember standing in the twins' bedroom, staring at the window. Outside, the street lamp flickered, and in the faint light, I thought I saw 2 silhouettes reflected in the glass. 2 small heads tilted together, swaying. But when I turned, the twins were both asleep. They relocated across town, and for a while I heard nothing. Months later, the mother called me, her voice shaky. She said Amy was fine now. No more vanishing, no strange objects, no doubles. But Allison had started to disappear instead. Hours gone, no memory when she returned. The family refused to meet in person. They didn't want me visiting. It was as if speaking about it at all might invite something back into their lives. I keep thinking about those 2 voices on the monitor. The way they harmonized perfectly in step with each other, like they'd been practicing for years. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if the twins were ever just 2, or if there was always a third. I tell myself I must have imagined the extra girl in the photo, that the objects could have been misplaced trinkets, that kids are capable of wandering farther than we think, that sleepwalking can explain a lot. That's the story I repeat to myself when I can't sleep. But then I remember the song, the voices I know I heard, and how, when I replayed the recording the next morning, the tape was silent, only static. And even now, I sometimes catch myself humming that same unfamiliar tune without realizing it. Story number 5, I've worked as a freelance investigator for over a decade now. Most of the cases aren't glamorous. They're the kind of jobs no one writes novels about. Suspicious spouses, background checks, tracking down people who owe money. Nothing exciting, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy. This particular case was supposed to be routine. A woman wanted to know if her husband was sneaking around with someone else. She swore he'd been driving out at night and heading toward the wetlands outside town. Supposedly, he was meeting a lover in an abandoned property near the river. I'd driven past that area a few times in the past. There's not much there, just swampy land, some broken roads, and houses people gave up on when the floods kept washing through. I didn't expect to find much, but I agreed to check it out. I parked off the road just before sunset, watching the house from a distance. It looked exactly like something out of a low-budget horror flick. Overgrown weeds swallowing the porch, boards nailed haphazardly across the windows, roof caved slightly in the middle. It didn't look like a place anyone would bother sneaking into, let alone carry on an affair. For a long while, nothing happened. The sky dimmed, the frogs and insects kicked up their nightly chorus, and the house just sat there like a rotting tooth. No car pulled up, no man slipped inside. But something about the stillness pressed at me, like the whole area was holding its breath. Eventually, I decided to get closer. That's always the part of the job I hate. Watching from a distance feels professional. Walking right up to a decrepit structure where I have no business being, that feels like volunteering for trouble. The porch groaned under my weight, each step whining like an old hinge. I was halfway up when I heard it, a deep cracking sound, sharp and sudden. It wasn't my boots, and it wasn't wind. It was like the wood was breaking in two, only the noise came from somewhere inside. I froze, heart pounding, eyes darting over the shadows beyond the boards. That's when I saw movement. Just for a second, through a slit where two planks didn't quite meet, something shifted upstairs. A pale face, or what looked like one, tilted unnaturally, like someone's head jerking forward in quick, mechanical bursts. Not fluid, not human. I blinked hard and it was gone. Now I know what you're thinking. Low light, nerves, shadows playing tricks. That was my first thought too. I told myself I'd imagined it, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. My skin prickled, and the damp air seemed to cling tighter around me. I tried the back door. To my surprise, it opened without resistance. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with rot and mildew. The smell of stagnant water hit me instantly, and I could hear dripping somewhere above. The silence in that house was the worst kind, too absolute. My own breathing sounded too loud, my steps too sharp. It was the kind of quiet that makes your brain start supplying noises that aren't there, like whispers behind you or someone exhaling just out of sight. Every shadow seemed too deep, too long. Corners felt like they curved inward, like the house itself was leaning closer. The wallpaper peeled in thick curls, exposing damp wood beneath, and the floor sagged as if resenting every step I took. I told myself I'd just make a quick sweep, check for signs of anyone squatting, maybe some evidence of the husband's visits. Then I'd be gone. I reached the staircase. That's when I saw him. At the bottom of the stairs, against the black gap under the landing, stood a figure, man-shaped, tall, thin, almost stretched. It wasn't moving, but it was there, unmistakably there. My eyes tried to adjust to make sense of the shape, but what fixed me to the spot was the face. Blank, no features at first, and then, slowly, too slowly, a grin spread across it. Wide, too wide. I swear the smile reached further than a mouth should go. My chest tightened, and for a split second, my body refused to obey the instinct to run. I felt nailed to the spot, like the house wanted me to stay. Then something shifted. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was pure terror. I bolted. My foot slipped on the wet tile near the back door, nearly sending me face first into the floor. But somehow I kept moving. I didn't look back, but I swear I could feel that smile following me out into the night. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, with the engine roaring and the headlights cutting through the reeds. Even then, I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that pale face hitching a ride in the back seat. I never told the client about what I saw. I just gave her a vague report, told her I couldn't confirm anything. A week later, she called me again, voice trembling but strangely relieved. Her husband had confessed. He admitted he'd been visiting a woman out in that area, but she said the story didn't make sense. He described her as strange, hard to look at directly. He claimed he never went inside the house with her, only met her near it. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know more. But there are things that don't add up. For one, the place has been abandoned for decades. I checked the property records later, half out of curiosity, half out of fear. I'd imagined the whole thing. No one has legally owned it for years. No utilities, no maintenance. Just a collapsing husk of wood and nails. The dripping I heard upstairs could have been a busted pipe, though no water's been connected there in decades. The figure? Maybe just my brain stitching together shadows. Stress can do that, and yet I can't shake the memory of that smile. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt aimed, like something in that house wanted me to see it, wanted me to carry it with me. To this day, I sometimes dream about that place. The dreams always start the same. I'm standing on the porch, listening to the wood crack inside, and then I wake up before I see the face, sweating, heart racing. I've driven past the wetlands since, but I never stop. The house still stands, slumped deeper each year, half-eaten by vines. It looks like it should have collapsed long ago, but it hasn't. Maybe the husband really was meeting someone. Maybe there's a logical explanation, some reclusive squatter or a trick of the dark. But when I remember that blank face twisting into a smile, logic doesn't do much to comfort me. If you ask me, some places aren't abandoned at all. They're waiting. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to look too closely, they notice you back. Story number 6. Back when I was sheriff in a small town up in northern Michigan, we had this unofficial tradition every spring. Along with the fog rolling in from the woods, there would always be at least one call from some terrified driver swearing they almost hit a woman walking along the road at night. Every call was eerily consistent. An older woman, long, wet hair, no jacket, no shoes, just this slack, hollow expression on her face. We would respond, of course. Run the stretch of road with lights on, poke into the tree line, sometimes even bring dogs if it was close to a missing persons report. But without fail, we'd find nothing. No footprints, no belongings, no stranded person. Just fog so thick it made the beams of your headlights look like you were cutting through milk. For years, I filed those calls as mistaken identity. The fog in our town had a way of messing with people's vision. You'd see shadows move when there weren't any. A deer could easily look like a person if you caught just a glimpse. Still, the fact that the descriptions were nearly identical always sat in the back of my mind like a pebble in a shoe. One night, though, I stopped being a skeptic. I had just finished looking into a reported break-in on the far end of town. Nothing serious, just some kids messing around. I was tired and ready to head home. The fog was worse than usual that night, so thick it looked like smoke was pouring from the ground. My high beams barely lit more than 10 feet ahead of me. That's when I saw her. She was in the middle of the road, walking away from me, slow, almost like each step hurt her. Her hair looked soaked, stringy, plastered to her neck and shoulders, but the rest of her was bone dry. She dragged her feet, not caring about the car behind her. I rolled the window down, more out of instinct than anything else. Asked if she needed help. Nothing. No reaction, not even a turn of the head. Just the shuffle of feet. Then she vanished. I don't mean she ran off into the trees. I mean 1 second she was in my headlights, and the next she was gone. No sound of movement, no silhouette fading into the fog. Just gone. I pulled over hard, slammed it in park, and got out. Adrenaline had me stupid. I should have called it in and waited. But something about the way she moved, it wasn't right. It felt wrong to just let it go. I stepped into the fog, flashlight in hand. The woods swallowed the beam almost instantly. The deeper I walked, the more muffled everything got, like sound couldn't travel. No wind, no insects, no crunch of branches underfoot. Just me, my breathing, and this heavy silence. Then came the tapping. At first I thought it was a branch shifting in the wind, except there wasn't any wind. The The taps were distinct, like knuckles on glass, slow, deliberate, and worst of all, they were close. I spun in circles trying to figure out where it was coming from, but the fog distorted everything. 1 second it felt like it was right behind me, the next like it was off to my left. Always near, never pinpointable. The tapping grew rhythmic, almost impatient, and I started backing up, shining my flashlight all around. My boot hit something, and before I knew it, I was on the ground, pain searing up my leg. I'd stepped into a rusted animal trap, one of the old steel ones with jagged teeth that someone must have abandoned years back. My leg was bleeding, sock already soaking through. Every time I tried to pry the thing open, the teeth dug in deeper. Panic set in fast. And then I saw her again. She was standing a few yards away, barely visible in the fog. Same soaked hair, same empty face. Her hands hung limp at her sides, and I swear I could hear water dripping, though there wasn't a puddle around her. I shouted out, or maybe it came out as a groan, begging for help. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there watching me bleed. Finally, adrenaline took over. I managed to wrench my leg free, tearing skin in the process, and staggered up. My flashlight beam swung wild as I limped toward her. She didn't run, didn't react, just turned and began walking deeper into the fog. I followed. I don't know why. Maybe it was anger, maybe curiosity, maybe something else entirely, but I couldn't let her slip away. She led me into a small clearing I didn't recognize. For a moment I thought I'd finally catch up to her, but then she stopped. Dead still. I was maybe 5 feet away when it happened. She turned her head just enough for me to see her face. Her eyes glowed faint red. Not like a flashlight glare, not like an animal's reflection, a faint, unnatural light seeping from inside. It was subtle, but in the fog it was unmistakable. My body froze. Every instinct screamed to run. And just as suddenly as she appeared, she stepped back into the fog. I rushed after her, but when I reached the spot, there was nothing. No tracks in the soft earth, not even disturbed leaves. The ground was untouched. It took me nearly an hour to limp back to my car. My leg was a mess. I ended up needing stitches. I didn't tell the ER nurse the truth. Said I got careless checking a poacher's trap. The next morning, I went back with 2 deputies to look for signs. We found the trap, we found my blood, but no footprints. No sign of anyone else being there. They chalked it up to me being tired, disoriented, maybe spooking myself in the fog. For years, I convinced myself that's all it was. Just exhaustion and the fog playing tricks. But then, one afternoon, an old-timer who'd lived in town forever came into the station. He was rambling about local history, and he mentioned a widow who had hanged herself in those very woods decades earlier after losing her husband in an accident. Said her body wasn't found for weeks. By the time someone stumbled across her, her hair was still damp, like the morning dew never dried off her. I never told him what I'd seen, but his words have stayed with me. Even now, long after I retired, I can't drive that stretch of road in the fog without gripping the wheel a little tighter. I know what I saw, even if I can't explain it. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe it was shock from the trap. Maybe the fog itself messed with my brain. But sometimes when the weather's right, I swear I still see a shape moving just ahead in the mist. And every so often, when the house is dead quiet, I hear it again. That slow, deliberate tapping, always near, never from a direction I can pin down. Story number 7. I've been a detective for over a decade, and I've seen things I wish I could erase from my head. But this one case, if I can even call it that, still keeps me awake at night. I'll tell it exactly as it happened, and you can judge for yourself. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe not. It was a hot summer evening when a woman walked into my office. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, clutching a small purse like her life depended on it. She told me her son had been missing for more than 2 weeks. I've dealt with dozens of missing person cases before, but there was something unsettling about the way she spoke. Her voice was low, strained, and when she handed me a photograph of the boy, her hands were trembling like she was freezing, despite the heat. She gave me her address and asked me to come by the house that evening. When I arrived, only the porch light was on. The rest of the street was quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I was about to leave when I heard the sound of a lock clicking open. The door creaked, but nobody was standing there. Inside, it was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows the beam of your flashlight. I stepped in cautiously, announcing myself out of habit, but no one replied. The air smelled stale, like damp wood and something faintly metallic. As I moved deeper, I came across what I assumed was the boy's room. There were toys scattered on the floor, a small bed against the wall, and posters peeling off. Everything looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. While searching, I tripped over a shoebox shoved halfway under the bed. Inside was a glass jar, filled with a cloudy liquid. Floating inside it was what looked like a child's finger. I froze. My skin crawled, and a heaviness filled the room. I could feel someone standing above me. My chest tightened as if I was being watched from directly over my shoulder. When I whipped my light upward, nothing was there. Just the cracked ceiling and a faint drip of water leaking from somewhere. I wanted to call it in right away, but something told me to keep looking. The house seemed too quiet, but as I moved into the hallway, I thought I heard a faint scratching noise, like nails dragging lightly against plaster. The sound followed me as I pushed open another door. That's when I saw her. The woman who had come to me earlier was sitting cross-legged in the center of the room. The entire floor was covered in symbols drawn in ash or charcoal, forming a large star that glowed faintly, as though the lines themselves held some residual heat. Around her were half-melted candles releasing a pungent, acrid smoke that stung my eyes. The smell was somewhere between rotting herbs and burning hair. Beside her lay another jar, this one open, and a small, severed finger rested on a cloth next to it. I felt my stomach churn. She was muttering under her breath, words I couldn't make out, but the rhythm was unsettling, like a chant. Then she stopped. Her head snapped up, and I swear her eyes were completely white. No pupils, no iris, just blank, milky voids. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared straight at me. A jolt of fear ran through me and instinct took over. I slammed the door shut and bolted down the hall. But the strangest thing happened. The more I ran, the longer the hallway seemed to stretch. Doors blurred past me on either side, none of them leading out. My legs were burning, and yet I felt like I wasn't moving at all. Finally, the front door came into view. I shoved it open and stumbled onto the porch. At that exact moment, the light above the door flickered once, then went completely dark. The house behind me was swallowed in shadow. I didn't wait around. I jumped into my car and sped off. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. The next morning I came back. Part of me hoped it was just exhaustion and imagination playing tricks on me. When I knocked again, no one answered. A neighbor, an old man watering his plants, looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He told me no one had lived there for months. The woman left right after her son went missing, and the house had been empty ever since. I didn't believe him at first, but when I went inside, it was like a completely different place. Every surface was covered in dust, sheets draped over furniture, spider webs strung across corners. Even the air smelled different, stale and heavy, like it hadn't been touched in ages. The boy's room was stripped bare. No toys, no posters, not even a bed frame. Just an empty square with sun-faded walls. I looked under the spot where I had found the box. Nothing but dirt and dust. The jar was gone. The room where I had seen the woman performing whatever ritual she was doing was the same. Empty. No candles, no marks on the floor, no ash, no smell. Just 4 blank walls and an uneven floorboard creaking under my weight. But here's the thing that still eats at me. On the wall closest to the window, hidden beneath a layer of dust, was a faint outline of something. When I wiped it with my sleeve, the star I had seen the night before was still there, faint like it had been burned into the wood itself. I didn't stay long after that. I left, filed a basic missing persons report, and moved on to other cases. Officially, the file says the boy was never found, and the house remained vacant. That's the version I gave to my department. But I can't stop thinking about it. About the jar, the hallway stretching endlessly, the woman's blank white eyes, and how, when I dream about it now, I always end up back in that house, standing in that same hallway, running and running, but never reaching the door. Maybe it was stress. Maybe exhaustion made me hallucinate. Maybe the mind sees patterns when it's desperate for answers. That's the rational side of me talking. But late at night, when I wake up and feel that same heavy pressure on my chest, the sensation of someone standing right above me, I start to wonder if the case ever really ended at all.